Hi, everybody. My name is Paul Yuknovich. I'm one of the group program managers at Microsoft. My team and my group, we work on the Azure tools and the Azure SDK. Excellent. So let's go to the overview. So first thing, when we think about designing each version of the SDK, we've actually shipped, I'd have to do the math here, I should have done it ahead of time, I think about 18 versions of the SDK now, from 1.x, let's say up through 1.8, 2.0, now we're up to 2.6, and there are even some pre-release versions in there. So really it's all about just enabling developers to build and accelerate the use of Azure inside their applications. We've even broadened out from there, but we want to help you just make your life better doing dev tests using Azure if we can. We ship super often. I've worked on lots of different, let's say, Visual Studio products that have shipped, as long as every 3 years apart. We ship about every 3 or 4 months with Azure SDKs, so for us that was pretty aggressive. Some things we're even doing sprintly, what I call it, so like every 3 weeks. That's been really fun. And we even do some projects now out in the open, out in GitHub with you guys, which we can kind of work on every day, and you can see improvements every day. So that's really thrilling to work on. Then there's different kind of dimensions of the SDKs, or different SDKs, which you'll see on Azure.com in downloads. There's versions for .NET. So .NET was the first SDK that we put out, and there's honestly more there right now. So we have SDKs always for about 2 versions of Visual Studio. So for Visual Studio 2012 and 2013, we did SDKs. Also, we like to keep up with a pre-release. So if there's, there's RC out there right now for Visual Studio for 2015, so we did tools for that too. Then we also keep up a set of command line and PowerShell tools that make your life really great there. Then kind of for Java, I saw almost no hands, but just so you know, there are Eclipse and IntelliJ plugins. So if you guys work with different teams and departments, they can use Azure also, even if they're on Java, so that's good to know. And also we support Node, Python, Ruby. So sometimes that's a surprise to folks. The SDK, we literally just shipped it. Sarab, who's one of the PMs on my team, he's still coming off the hot seat for getting that thing out the door. So we just got that out. It's available for all 3 versions of VS that I talked about. So definitely go get it. You can even get it during the session if you want to. There's other options for you, which are pretty cool. So one thing we created, about 9 months ago, is we actually created images that are meant for developers up in Azure. So you can go create a virtual machine right now, and you'll see that you can create a Visual Studio 2013 community, or you can create a pre-release version. So basically, these are the things that are freely available to download. You can get those right now on VMs, and they're pre-installed with the SDK, and they're just really ready to go. So in about 5 to 8 minutes, you'll have one provisioned, and a minute later, you'll be up and developing on the new stuff. Also, if you guys have MSDN subscriptions, so definitely check that out. You have $150 or up to that in US dollars credits every month for Azure. So that's, you could run a decent sized VM running the whole time, which you probably don't want to do, but that's how much compute power you have. Definitely check that out, and we have more images. So you get the higher editions of Visual Studio in there, right? You get the Professional and Ultimate. You get client images, so really no other cloud is authorized to do that. We actually have Windows 7, Windows 8.1 client. You can use those as test desktops in the cloud. So really cool stuff. Please go check that out.
Hey, it's Scott Hanselman, and I'm here with Guang Yang talking about PowerShell 101, Azure, managing it all from the command line.
Yes.
We can do
exactly. that. Yeah, definitely. Why not?
So what do I have to do to get set up?
Oh, first of all, you can go to the Azure homepage, and you can click this download side. You can see we have SDK downloads, and we have commands downloads as well. Inside the commands downloads in Azure PowerShell, you can just click install, and this will actually bring up a web platform feed for you to install everything you need for this PowerShell. Now, sometimes when you install this web PI feed, you will also install something like the storage emulator, a compute emulator, and authoring tools. This is because some of our commands for cloud services, they need them to actually do emulator and do packaging for cloud services. If you don't want them,
It's okay if I don't want them?
Yeah. If you don't want them, then you cannot use the cloud service command. But if you are like a VM guy or you only want to do storage or website, you can go to our GitHub repo and voila, we are actually open source project in GitHub. You can go to the release page. You can see we have all the releases here. We have the web platform installer link. We also have a Windows standalone MSI link, and you get a very nice release note for every release we have.
Very
so you
cool.
can also install it by the standalone MSI.
Nice. That's good. It's good to have choice. Not everybody wants to run the big MSI.
Yes, and after you install this, so we actually give you two ways. You can either do Windows PowerShell,
Okay.
or you can do Windows Azure PowerShell. So the Windows Azure PowerShell is just a shortcut we provide you, and also gives you some nice hints. The first time you start it, you can see how you can manage it over. But a lot of the PowerShell guys, they actually prefer to use the plain old Windows PowerShell. This is because they have some of their modules and profiles set up already, so they have all their working environment here.
Right.
Now here, no problem. So you can also just open up Windows PowerShell, and we're smart enough to find out the Azure commands in it. So you don't need to do anything in the Azure PowerShell commands is there for you.
How did they get in here? Did you put them in my profile?
Well, so what it does, what it does is a PowerShell has something called a PS module path, which is an environment variable. So PowerShell can actually load all the modules from this path. So we just made our Azure module into this PS module path environment variable, so then it is discoverable.
I see. It's a system level, system-wide module.
It's a user-wide.
User-wide,
Yes.
pardon me. Okay, cool. So then they're available to me in both the Azure PowerShell prompt and my regular one.
Yes.
All right, so then I know that when I log into Azure, I have to put in my name and my password. I probably don't want to do that here, do I?
Well, so we actually gave you two ways for you to set up your Azure PowerShell and authenticate against your Azure account. So first of all, we support what we call the management certificate authentication. So in this way, essentially you are setting up a certificate in Azure itself, and you are using the certificate to authenticate all the API calls we're actually going to make from PowerShell.
I see, and I could revoke that certificate. If
Yes,
I
so you
don't
can go to
use
the Azure portal to revoke it. So now you can actually generate a cert and upload it to Azure itself, but if you are like lazy like me, you don't want to do that, right? So we gave you a command to do get Azure publish settings file.
Oh, nice.
And this command will open up a browser, log in, like if I use my live ID, and you can see my .cn live ID account.
I didn't know that was a thing. Nice.
Yeah, so because I already logged in once, so it didn't ask me for password. But here, this is how I get the here's how I get the subscription publish settings file. After I get this, I can do import Azure publish settings file, and I can say, I think it's in download somewhere, and this guy. It's actually this guy, right? So this is how I import this publish settings file into my Azure PowerShell. So this file will include all the subscriptions I have under my account, their subscription ID. It will also automatically generate a cert, put it in Azure, download it as a base64 encoding string inside the file. So when we import it, we get it. We put it into your certificate store, and we store a mapping between the subscription and the cert using the thumbprint.
That's
This
nice.
is how we do the cert-based authentication.
That's nice and secure.
Yes.
So I can revoke it on the Azure side or delete it in the local machine
Yes.
side.
So we have a command to delete your subscription as well, and that would just delete everything for you.
Now, I've got multiple subscriptions. I've got MSDN, I've got one for work, I've also got a pay-as-you-go. Do I need to switch between those?
Yes, yes you do. But before we go there, so there is another way that I really want to show you how to set up your Azure PowerShell.
Cool.
So recently we added the ability to use Active Directory authentication. So the way you do it is you do add Azure account, and this will actually pop up the browser, pop an embedded browser here.
Wow.
So I can install. So I can log in with my live ID.
Is that allowed? You did that with PowerShell?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, this is pretty cool. So I can log in with my live ID. I can log in with my org ID. And if your account has multi-factor auth enabled, it will actually do the multi-factor auth in this embedded browser as well. So you have everything covered.
Nice.
And in this case, I log in with my live ID again. So this is using the Active Directory authentication for me.
So that could have been my company's login
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah, it can be your org ID. So I can use my alias at Microsoft.com. You can use your alias at Microsoft.com. Now we have both of them set up.
Oh, so they're both there. So this one didn't overwrite that one. They're there together.
Well, so interesting you ask. So it actually overrides it. So we have the logic to say if you have both of them set up, PowerShell has to pick one of them.
Right.
So our logic is we will always pick Active Directory authentication if you have both of them, because we definitely want to encourage people to use this new authentication mechanism. Now this leads to a question, what if I don't want to use it? What if I want to fall back to the management certificate authentication, right?
Right.
So you do this by remove Azure account, and you do -name, and in this case is my email address here. So this will actually remove all the Active Directory information from Azure PowerShell, so then it will fall back to the management cert authentication. So this provides you a way to switch between each other.
It's kind of a scoping.
Yeah, it's kind of scoping, or it's kind of like a mode. So it's like you are either in the Active Directory authentication mode, or you are in the management certificate authentication mode. So you can choose which one to use.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so now we set up our authentication mechanism. It's time to answer the question like whether I can have multiple subscriptions. You can definitely have multiple subscriptions. In fact, you can also have multiple accounts. Now, you notice that we are using a command called add Azure account. We're not saying like set account or log in, whatever, right? So the reason is because we allow you to log in multiple times. We allow you to use multiple accounts. So the way I can do this to say, hey, I want to have, so before I use my live ID to log in. What if I want to use my Microsoft org ID? What should I do? So I can do add Azure account again. So this will open up, right? And I can say, hey, give me, oops, this is getting weird.
Maybe a little lower there, right there?
Yeah. Okay,
That's
so
goofy.
yeah, I can say, let me log in with my Microsoft org ID. So I do continue.
And then this is going to take from the live ID, and I've seen this before. There's our, oh, and so we're already inside Microsoft.
Yeah, we're already inside Microsoft, and this is IE, and so it's using the Microsoft's internal authentication. So I got logged in automatically.
Nice.
Now I logged in again. Now this time I'm going to do get Azure subscription. Right, so you see how many subscriptions I have.
Well,
I
you're
have
pretty popular, and you do a lot.
Well, so I have a lot of the test subscription as well, so they're actually not on the production Azure environment, they're in the testing Azure environment. So interesting to see, we have no CLI tests in production, and it's actually under my org ID account.
Right.
So this guy, I think, where is my, yeah, this guy,
and there's
so
your live one there.
this is my MSDN subscription, so this is under my, live ID account.
Because that's your personal MSDN.
Yes, that's my personal MSD. So this is how you can add multiple accounts, multiple subscription. You can set them up in Azure PowerShell. Now the question is, how do I want to switch between them? Because I want to work on multiple of them, right?
Right.
So we have two different concepts around this. We have a concept of default subscription. We also have a concept of current subscription. So let's try the default one. So I can do get Azure subscription. I can do -default. And this will only return me one subscription. And notice here it says is default true. So default means I can have this default subscription across PowerShell sessions. So if I close this PowerShell, open another one, this will always be the default. Now another concept is current subscription. That means what is the subscription I want to use only in my current PowerShell session. So I can change that, and if I close PowerShell, reopen it, it won't be there. So it's only a PowerShell session level. And so the way you do it is you do get Azure subscription, and you do -current as the parameter. Now it returns the same thing because I haven't chosen a different subscription yet.
Right.
Right. So the way you choose a different subscription, let's say I want to go to this guy over here, for example.
Like you might want to choose one in a script and switch temporarily within that script.
Yes, exactly. You can definitely do that. So the way you do it is you say select Azure subscription, and you do subscription name. You paste the subscription name here, and you can say -current. So this will change the current subscription. Now here, I've done it.
What if you didn't say -current? What is it?
So it's the same thing. So by default, we will only choose the current subscription as in the current session. So because it's safer, and we don't just want to change the global one, the default one for you automatically. So now if I do a get current, so you can see it's already going to my new subscription.
Okay.
I can also do, so I can also do, -default. Now this will just change my global one. I don't want to do that. And actually, I think I want to change it back to this guy because this is the production subscription I have, and we're gonna do some demo on this subscription. So I could change it back to current.
So now you've got that context set in closing. What's an activity that you could do on Azure with this particular subscription?
Yes.
So let's do a little. Can you show me like maybe your storage accounts or list those out?
Sure, sure. So before that, let me go to the portal to just show you that we're actually doing this. We're not faking any results, right? So I have 4 storage accounts over here already.
One community, 2 portal, and 1 for yourself.
1 community, 2 portal.
Yeah.
2, yes.
Okay.
So now let's do this. Get Azure storage account, right? And the nice thing about this command is that you can pretty much guess what this command looked like. And now this is the response. You can see I have the first one. This is community. Second one, this is my own, and then the portal one. So this is the portal one. This is another portal one. So I can get all the storage. I can get all the storage come back. The nice thing about this is that you can also use PowerShell help system to discover what we support. So if you do help Azure, this will actually list all the commands we support, and you can see there's a lot of them.
Wow.
But hey, what if I just want to know the storage ones, right? So we design our commands in a way, in this convention, to say we do Azure and then the service name. We always do this. So if you do help Azure storage, this will return all the storage accounts. And if you only want to work on storage, this is what we care about. And you can go to each one of them. You can say help Azure storage, get Azure storage account. This is account. So this is what we ran just now. And you can even give it a dash foo. So this will return everything, including the examples we put over there.
It's like man pages. It's the complete instructions.
Yes, exactly.
Very cool. We're learning all about Azure PowerShell 101 here on Azure Friday.
Hi, and welcome to this brief screencast explaining how to use Azure API Management Service Management API. So let me go back to the browser. Note that I'm in the Azure API Management Publisher portal on the security page on the API Management REST API tab. First thing you need to do in order to use the API is to enable it. By default it is disabled, so you have to opt in by checking the checkbox. After you check the checkbox, we're going to generate an identifier for you to access the API and 2 keys, primary and secondary. Those keys are equivalent and can be used interchangeably, and the reason we provide 2 keys instead of 1 is so that you can rotate keys easily. We also provide a URL to the management API, and it is essentially the management API endpoint for your specific tenant. And as you can see, it has tenant name in the URL. In my case, it's Epiphany. We also provide a UI here so that you can generate a token, expiring it at some point in the future using one of the 2 keys. And after you generate it, you can easily copy it into either your code or into your tool of choice to make calls to the management API. One other noteworthy thing here is the link to actual documentation for the API. So as you can see from the documentation, we provide management operations on a majority of entities in the system which are related to API management. Prerequisite section here is quite important. It sort of discusses certain things that you need to do to be able to successfully call any of the methods of the API. It walks you through enabling the API, explaining what the default media type is, and then how to authenticate with the API, and the fact that you need to provide version parameter. And you can, as you can see here, you can actually either programmatically generate access token or through the UI that I showed you. And this section, programmatically create an access token section, is actually showing you a snippet of code which does programmatically create an access token, so you can use that if you need to. So let's go back and take a look at the instance here. So as you can see, I have just one API, which is called Echo API, and just 2 products, Starter and Unlimited. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to manipulate, manage essentially this API management instance through the API. And I will, create product and create an API and create operations and connect those things together, and then essentially will programmatically do things that before we were able to do only through the UX. So let me bring up a tool. This is essentially a generic client for making HTTP requests to endpoints. So as you can see here, at the top you have a URL that you're calling. This section here allows you to set headers and various other things like body parameters for the request. This section in the middle shows you actual request that is going to be sent based on the parameters entered above. And of course, this bottom section will show the response. So I pre-created and sort of catalog here some of the requests that I will be making so that we can do it quickly. So I have an API, Calculator API. You're probably familiar with it if you watched any of the other videos. It's sort of the API that we commonly use to demonstrate API management. So as you can see, I'm trying to add two numbers, A and B, 99 and 1. And if I make a call, you're going to see that I'm going to get a result, which is basically 100, which is what we need to have, obviously, based on the input. And you can see two things here, that the parameters are accepted through query parameters A and B, and then the result is XML. And you don't have to provide any except header here, and regardless of what you provide, we're always going to get XML. So I'm going to actually onboard this Calculator API into API Management instance I just showed you, and make it available for developers to sign up and use, changing two things. First off, I'm going to change the parameters from query to path here. In the sort of in how the API is getting invoked. So I'm going to basically change the URL signature of this API, and also I'm going to enable JSON responses in addition to XML based on accept header. So let's start doing this. So by the way, this is I can actually go and check what APIs I have, and right now in the system, as you can see, that I have only one API. Echo API as I showed you, right? So just to demonstrate that I'm talking to the same API management tenant that I just showed you. So let's start with creating an API. So let's take a look here. So first off, note two things, that you have to provide as a prerequisite for every request an API version. And I parameterized it within this tool. But you can see that API version parameter is required here. We also need to provide an authorization header, and it also parameterized in my case. And that authorization header allows us to authenticate with an API. So it contains a token, very identical, obviously different value, but identical to the one that I showed you in the publisher portal just a few minutes ago. So for this particular call, essentially what we do is we have an APIs collection, which essentially lists all the APIs available in this tenant. So now I'm actually adding a new API, and I assign it an identifier of calc. So this could be any random string of numbers and letters. It doesn't really matter what it is. I'm just using calc because it's very natural and it's easy to understand. But again, this is not the name of the API. This is the ID of the API. So think about the pattern as collection/ID of an individual item in the collection. Okay, and then I'm providing information about the API I want to create through a body, which is specified in JSON format. And as you can see, I'm providing service URL, path, supported protocols for the API. I provide its name and description. So all these things that you used to provide through the API, through the UI, we are providing here as a JSON payload. So let's make a call and see if we are successful. Yes, we are. So you see that we get 201 successful status code which is, basically says that the API is created. And we can actually go and confirm this by invoking this get APIs, right? Again, we're just doing get on the APIs collection here. You can look at the URL. And if we do that, you can see that now I actually have an extra API here with the ID of calc, right? Which is, exactly what I wanted to create. And just to again emphasize that calc here is an identifier, not the name, right? It helps. I mean, it happens to coincide or match the path, but these are completely different things. And as you can see in this API that was created by default when the instance was created, you can see that its ID is basically a GUID, right? So instead of GUID, you can use any arbitrary string of characters. Great. So we've got an API at this point. So at this point, we want to basically assign a policy to this thing because when I showed you the original API, I mentioned that I would like to make sure that this API will be able to actually return JSON or XML based on the accept header. And essentially here, I'm attaching policy to this API. And you can see that what I'm doing is I'm doing a put on a policy within the API, within ID calc, within the APIs collection. And I'm essentially supplying a policy document very similar to the one that you would see, in fact, identical to the one that you would supply in the UX. One thing to note here that in addition to authorization header that has to be always present, similar to API version, content type here is not application JSON, but rather a custom header XML-based, custom XML-based content type, specifically sort of specifying that this is in fact API management policy. So let's invoke this operation. It is successful. So at this point we have actually an API which has a policy associated with that. Let's add an operation to this API. So every API in API management can have one or more operations, and so let's create one. Again, here, as you can see, we are doing put on APIs collection. Within that collection, we're choosing the API with an ID calc, and then we are creating an operation with an ID sum under its operations collection. Again, very regular structure of the API: collection ID, and then within that there is another collection and another ID, right? So very simple to deduce, and pretty much all the entities within this API work similar ways. So as soon as you get the hang of it, it will be very easy for you to navigate, and you won't need to actually go in and check on documentation. So here, exactly the same motion. We are actually creating an operation. We providing a body which describes that operation here. And you can see that we have a name for this operation as description, method, the template, and then we describe each of the template parameters, and then even response, right? So now interesting thing here is you can see that URL template specifies A and B as path parameters rather than query parameters. And that's great. That's what I want it to be, right? And so let's go and create it. There we go. So now we have actually an API with a policy and then an operation on this API. Of course, if we leave things as is, right? What's going to happen is when you call the API, it's not going to it's going to try to forward to the backend using path parameters versus query parameters, and that of course will cause failure. So we actually need to add a rewrite policy to that operation to make sure that we're converting the request to a proper form that is expected by the backend service. In addition to that, I'm also setting caching, obviously, because it's a very cacheable API. So I added caching here as well. So this is our rewrite statement, and you can see cache as well. Again, we are assigning policy to an operation with an ID sum to an API with an ID calc. Very understandable. And again, if you look at the type, it is type of policy in API management. So let's go and invoke that. It's set. So at this point we have API and operation, and both of them have policies assigned to it. As you know, for APIs to be accessible to end users, they have to be published as part of the product. So in this case, I create a special product. I call it special, and again, very similar structure of URL. So I'm doing a put on products collection, and creating a new product with an ID special. Again, it's not the name, it's the ID. I'm providing a body which describes the product, right? Over here, very short description. And let me execute this operation. Great, now we have a product. So, of course, this product doesn't have any APIs yet, so let's assign Calc API to that product. So again, what I'm doing here, I'm doing a put on the products collection for the specific entity with an ID special. And in its APIs collection, I associate sort of a Calc API with the ID Calc to the APIs collection of this product. So let me do that. Excellent. So at this point, we've got a product, a special product, and it has associated API, which we just created. Let's take a look. Let's retrieve all the products and see it. Okay, so here we have at the top special product, and if you look at this, you can see that the state of it is not published. We need to actually publish the product first before it can be used. So let's go and publish the product. So here I'm doing a patch because I'm basically modifying the status of this product, that we have, ID, assigned ID of special in the products collection. So let's do that. Let's patch it to published. Let's check if we were successful. Okay, you see here we've got state published, so everything is good. So at this point, what we have is we have created an API and an operation, assigned policies to both. Then we created a product and associated the API with the product and then published the product. So at this point, we are actually good to go. So in fact, we have everything ready to be able to actually make calls to the Calculator API through API management. Just to verify, let's go and look at our, let's refresh here and see what we can see in the publisher portal. Well, not surprisingly, we actually have a Calculator API. We also have a special product, and if we dive into that product, we see that it's published and it has a Calculator API associated with that. If we go further and investigate, Calculator API, we can see that we have add to numbers operation, and we can look at that operation. We can see that rewrite policy has been applied, and we've got parameters with nice descriptions and values and all that stuff. So, and if we go into the policies section in the policy editor and choose a Calculator API, we will see that we have policy assigned to it, and if we go to the operation level, we can see that we have rewrite and cache assigned. So everything that we used to do in the UX, we actually did through the API. So at this point, we can actually go ahead and start calling it. But before we do, we actually need to get a subscription key for this new product, since it's newly created. New keys were generated. I'm sorry, pressed wrong menu item. So let's go into profile. Let's take a look at my subscription to special product. Here are my keys. So let me grab it. Okay. Go back to my HTTP client. Here I have operations set up to actually call the API through call Calculator API through API management. So as you can see, this is my tenant. This is my base URL for my API management tenant. I assigned calc suffix for this API, and I'm calling add operation on this, adding 99 plus 1. And as you can see, I need to provide subscription key. So let me go and enter that. So here's subscription key. I parameterized them for convenience because they're used in multiple places. So let's go back a little bit here. And let's make a call and see what happens. Now, as you can see in headers, I'm actually asking for XML, so that's what I should receive. Excellent. Here we go. Result is 100. And if we change values here, let's say we're going to say 99 plus 2, obviously it's 101, so it's all working fine. And let's go now and ask for the same, result, 99 plus 1, but in JSON format, and see if the policy will apply. Let's do that. Yep, here is 100, and then, if we modify the input, let's say 2 here, make a call, it's 101. So everything is working great. So in a matter of a few minutes, we actually were able to programmatically manage APIs and products within API management. As I mentioned before, there's more capabilities here. We can create users, we can create groups, we can assign users to groups, we can actually retrieve report data. Let me show you that if I can find it here. For instance, if I want to get stats, and here I'm basically getting information from the API. You have to provide basically a query expression here, and you can read about it in documentation. So let's make a call here. Okay, so you can see that you can get information back, reports, essentially pretty much the same reports you will see in the UX through API. You can see that you can do it in text CSV, comma delimited format, which is very nice because you can actually put it in something like Excel and do further analysis or pivots on that. Or you can do the same thing with if you want to programmatically access the same data, you can actually do it, receive the same data, the same report in JSON format. Here we go. Okay, so that wraps up my demonstration of API management, service management API. Let me go to the PowerPoint here, switch to the last slide. Here's some information for you. You can follow and direct questions either to me directly or Azure API Management Twitter account or email. And of course, we are at azuremicrosoft.com APIM. So hope to hear from you, and thank you very much for being part of this screencast. Thank you.
I'm Janelle Crothers, and in this video, I'm going to provide an overview of the Azure Resource Manager. Applications are typically made up of many parts, maybe a web app, a SQL database, and other components. You could deploy each individually, but because they're related, you may want to deploy, manage, and monitor them as a group. Azure Resource Manager enables you to work with resources in a single coordinated operation when deploying, updating, and deleting as part of the overall lifecycle of the application. At the most basic, a resource group is a container that holds the related resources for an application. Here you can see a resource group with a website, a database, and application insights. From the preview portal, you can easily view costs, monitor events, and manage alerts. You can clarify the billing for your application by viewing the rolled up costs for the entire group. Azure Resource Manager provides a tagging feature that enables you to categorize resources according to your requirements. In the portal, you can start working with tags by clicking on the tag icon. Resources do not need to reside within the same group to share a tag, making them ideal for identifying resources by type or by billing chargebacks. In this example, I'm going to tag this resource group to the accounting department. Resource Manager also enables you to control who has access to specific actions for your organization. It natively integrates OAuth and role-based access control into the management platform. You can define access control by clicking on the Access button. Actions are automatically logged for auditing, and you can explicitly lock critical resources to prevent users from deleting or modifying them. In this example, I'm going to add a website contributor. Azure Resource Manager provides completely compatible operations through Azure PowerShell, the Azure command line interface, this Azure portal, and REST APIs. The portal even displays notifications for actions taken outside of the portal. Resource Manager is template-driven, And by using templates, you can repeatedly deploy your application in a consistent state. When you create a solution from the marketplace, it automatically includes a template, which you can customize to meet your specific needs. Depending on the template, parameters are already available for you to fill out to do this customization. Within a template, you do not need to worry about the order for deployment because Azure Resource Manager analyzes dependencies to ensure resources are created in the correct order. Azure Resource Manager allows you to quickly and easily deploy and manage all aspects of your application's lifecycle. Thanks for watching.